Let me say something I don't say lightly. In over 20 years of medicine, I have sat across from thousands of patients, young patients, middle-aged patients, and patients well into their 80s. And I can tell you with complete confidence, the ones who reach 75, 80, 85, and still move through life with energy, clarity, and genuine joy, they are not lucky. They are different. Deliberately, consistently, quietly different. Not because of expensive supplements, not because of perfect genetics, not because they never got sick or never faced hardship, because of 6 specific things they never stopped doing. I'm Dr. Eleanor Hayes, an internal medicine physician, and today I want to talk directly to the men and women between 75 and 85, or to anyone who loves someone in that season of life. Because what I'm about to share isn't just medically significant. It's something I find genuinely moving every time I see it in a patient. These 6 things separate the people who are simply alive at 80 from the ones who are truly living at 80. Here's the thread running through all of them. I call it the vitality gap. 2 people can reach 75 with nearly identical medical histories, same diagnoses, same medications, same basic health profile, and be living completely different lives 5 or 10 years later. One is sharp, engaged, mobile, and present. The other has quietly contracted, smaller world, less movement, less connection, less life. The vitality gap between them almost never comes down to medicine alone. It comes down to these 6 things. Let's go through them. And if you recognize yourself in any of them, I want you to know you are genuinely remarkable. 1. You still move your body every single day, not to look good, but because you refuse to stop. Here's what I want you to understand about movement at 75 and beyond. The research isn't subtle. It isn't qualified. It is among the most consistent findings in all of aging science. Adults between 75 and 85 who engage in some form of daily physical movement, walking, gardening, gentle resistance exercise, swimming, even consistent household activity, show measurably slower decline in muscle mass, bone density, cardiovascular function, and cognitive performance compared to those who don't. Not slightly slower, significantly slower. Study after study, across populations, across countries, across decades of research. But here's what the research can't fully capture, and what I see in my practice every single week. The people who still move at 80 aren't doing it because a study told them to. They're doing it because somewhere along the way they made a decision, conscious or unconscious, that their body was worth fighting for. That discomfort wasn't a reason to stop. That a slower walk was still a walk. That the garden still needed tending even when the knees complained. I had a patient, a woman in her early 80s, who walked 30 minutes every morning without exception. Rain, cold, the morning after a difficult night. She wasn't fast. She wasn't training for anything. She just walked. And when I looked at her cognitive test scores, her bone density results, her cardiovascular markers, they were the profile of someone 15 years younger. Movement at this age isn't about performance. It's about refusing to surrender territory you don't have to give up yet. If you still do this, every day, in whatever form your body allows, you are genuinely one of a kind. 2. You still have at least one relationship that requires you to show up. This one reaches beyond medicine, but the medicine behind it is extraordinary. Loneliness in adults over 75 has been described by researchers as a health risk equivalent in magnitude to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's not a metaphor. That's the finding from multiple large epidemiological studies. Chronic social isolation at this age is associated with accelerated cognitive decline, higher rates of cardiovascular disease, impaired immune function, and significantly shorter lifespan. But the flip side of that research is the part I want to focus on today. Adults in the 75 to 85 age range who maintain at least one relationship, one genuine, reciprocal, requiring something of them relationship, show consistently better outcomes across nearly every health metric studied. Not a casual acquaintance, not a weekly phone call out of obligation, a relationship where someone is genuinely waiting for them, where their presence matters, where showing up is not optional. It might be a spouse, a close friend they've had for 40 years, a grandchild they are actively involved in raising, a faith community that knows their name and notices when they're absent, a neighbor they check on, a garden club, a card game, a volunteer role, anything where another human being genuinely needs their presence. In my practice, this is one of the clearest predictors I know of which patients will still be sharp, engaged, and vital at 85 versus which ones will have quietly faded. Connection is not a comfort, it is a biological necessity. And maintaining it after 75, when the world can easily become smaller through loss, retirement, reduced mobility, requires real, deliberate effort. If you still have a relationship that asks something of you, that gives you somewhere to be and someone to be there for, protect it like the health intervention it genuinely is. If you still do this, you are truly one of a kind. 3. You still challenge your brain with something that doesn't come easily. Here's the truth about brain health at 75 that most people never hear clearly stated. Doing the same familiar activities, no matter how mentally engaging they feel, does not produce the same neurological benefit as learning something genuinely new. Crossword puzzles you've been doing for 30 years, a card game you mastered decades ago. Familiar routines, however pleasant, travel through established neural pathways. They maintain what already exists. They don't build new territory. What builds new territory is struggle. Genuine, uncomfortable, I'm not sure I can do this struggle with something unfamiliar. Research in cognitive neuroscience has shown that learning new skills, a new language, a new instrument, a new craft, a new technology, even a new physical activity requiring coordination, generates measurable changes in brain structure and function in adults well into their 80s. New synaptic connections form. Existing pathways strengthen in new directions. The brain, pushed into unfamiliar territory, responds by building more of itself. The patients of mine who have maintained the sharpest cognitive function deep into their 80s have almost universally kept learning. One man in his late 70s took up the piano for the first time in his life. A woman at 81 started learning conversational Spanish. Another patient began watercolor painting at 78 after a lifetime of never having held a paintbrush. None of them were talented beginners. All of them were uncomfortable and imperfect and kept going anyway. That willingness, to be a beginner again at 78 or 82, is one of the most quietly radical acts of self-preservation I know of. If you still do this, if you are still willing to be bad at something new in order to grow, you are genuinely remarkable, truly one of a kind. 4. You still take your sleep seriously and protect it without apology. Here's a conversation I have more than you might think. A patient in their late 70s tells me they only sleep 5 hours a night. They say it almost proudly, as if needing less sleep is a sign of vitality. As if sleep is something productive people don't waste too much time on. I have to gently, firmly, tell them. The research says the opposite. Sleep need does not decrease meaningfully with age. What decreases is sleepability. The architecture of sleep changes. Deep, slow-wave sleep becomes harder to sustain. Nighttime awakenings become more common. But the biological need for restorative sleep remains. And adults over 75 who chronically undersleep, whether by choice or by circumstance, show measurably accelerated cognitive decline, higher inflammatory markers, impaired immune function, and worse cardiovascular outcomes compared to those who protect their sleep. The glymphatic system, the brain's overnight waste-clearing process, operates almost exclusively during sleep. The nighttime blood pressure dip that protects the heart depends on consolidated, restful sleep. Muscle repair, immune regulation, memory consolidation, all of it happens during those hours. The people I know who are genuinely thriving at 80 and 85 treat sleep the way athletes treat training. It isn't optional. It isn't lazy. It is the foundation everything else is built on. They go to bed at a consistent time. They protect the hour before sleep as a wind down, not a stimulation window. They take nocturia seriously rather than dismissing it. And they do not apologize for prioritizing rest. If you still do this, if you treat sleep as the non-negotiable health foundation it is, you are ahead of most people half your age. You are truly one of a kind. 5. You still eat with intention, not perfection, but purpose. This one is not about following a trendy diet. It is not about restriction or deprivation or counting anything. It is about something much more specific and much more powerful. The people who are genuinely thriving between 75 and 85 eat with awareness. They haven't abandoned all pleasure at the table. In fact, many of the most vital older adults I know have a genuine, joyful relationship with food. But they make deliberate choices about what goes into their bodies, and they haven't stopped caring about those choices just because they're in their 80s. Research on dietary patterns in adults over 75 consistently shows the significance of a few specific factors. Adequate protein intake, which most older adults actually underconsume, is critical for preserving muscle mass and preventing the progressive muscle loss called sarcopenia that is one of the strongest predictors of functional decline after 75. A diet rich in anti-inflammatory foods, vegetables, olive oil, fatty fish, nuts, legumes, is associated with slower cognitive decline and lower cardiovascular risk across decades of longitudinal studies. And regular, consistent mealtimes, rather than erratic eating patterns, support metabolic stability and energy regulation in ways that matter specifically at this age. But beyond the specific nutrients and patterns, what I observe in my most vital older patients is an attitude. Food is still something they care about. They still cook when they can. They still sit down to eat rather than eating standing over the counter. They still consider what they're putting in their body and why. That intention, maintained across decades, still present at 80, is a form of self-respect that shows up directly in their health outcomes. If you still eat with purpose, if you still care about nourishing your body, even when nobody would blame you for stopping, you are truly one of a kind. 6. You still believe your best days are not entirely behind you. I save this one for last because it is the one that medicine struggles most to quantify, and the one that may matter most of all. In over 2 decades of clinical practice, I have noticed something that no randomized controlled trial fully captures. The patients who age most vitally, who remain sharp and engaged and genuinely present well into their 80s, share a particular orientation toward time. They are not living in the past. They are not simply enduring the present. They still have something they are moving toward. It might be a grandchild's graduation they intend to attend, a garden they're planning for next spring, a book they've been meaning to write, a trip they haven't taken yet, a skill they haven't mastered, a conversation they still want to have. They are, in the truest sense, still future-oriented, still curious, still expecting something from tomorrow. Research on psychological resilience in older adults bears this out. A sense of purpose, of having reasons to be here tomorrow, is independently associated with lower mortality, slower cognitive decline, better immune function, and higher reported well-being in adults across every age group studied, but with particular force in those over 75. The biological mechanisms are still being mapped, but the finding itself is among the most robust in all of aging research. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that the last of human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. I think of that often with my oldest patients. The ones who are truly thriving at 80 have chosen, actively, repeatedly, in the face of real loss and real limitation, to remain open to what comes next. That choice, made day after day, is not passive. It is an act of extraordinary courage. If you still believe that something good is still possible, if you are still curious about what tomorrow holds, then I want you to hear this clearly. You are not just one of a kind. You are an inspiration to every person who has the privilege of knowing you. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these 6 things do you still do? Are you between 75 and 85 and recognizing yourself in this list? Or are you watching someone you love live this way? Tell me in the comments. Your story matters, and it might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Leave your question below. Tell me what topic you want next. Each week, I bring your real questions to specialist doctors and this community, and your comment could be featured in an upcoming video. If this video moved you, please share it with someone between 75 and 85 who deserves to hear it. And subscribe. Every week, I share insights about aging well that you won't find in a 10-minute doctor's visit. This video is for educational purposes only and does not replace advice from your personal physician.